welcome to the live webinar on remote audits. My name is Ana Guedes and I'm the Technical and Quality Director of Helm Portugal. This webinar is a result of a partnership between Helm and Allpharma, and therefore I have here with me two of the most experienced auditors of Allpharma, André Luz and José Gomes. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope you also enjoyed the conversations that we will have on this topic, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to share with us a lot of useful insights and your experience on remote audits. But before we start, I would like to call your attention for the chat that you have on the webinar landing page, where you can post your questions, your comments. As you can see, I have a tablet here with me, so I'll be able to put these questions directly to our guests, our speakers, our professionals on the remote audits. Additionally, if you didn't have the chance to do so, please check our LinkedIn webpage of Helm Portugal, because we have some polls with topics regarding this topic that we have been posting for the past week, and we will be also able to address them during this webinar. And so to start, I think that would be exactly the perfect way to start, to go to check our first poll from LinkedIn. Are remote audits reliable? André, José, did you get the chance to vote?
Actually, no. I'm trying not to influence the polls.
Actually, I did have the chance to vote, so my vote is in there.
So, André, is the responses that we have from the people who voted in line with your experience?
First of all, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone that is seeing the webinar, and thank you very much, Anna, for having us here today, talking about this hot topic in the pharma business. Answering to your questions, that's something that we're going to try to find out during this webinar. If are the remote audits here to stay or not? So basically, we can talk a little bit about what is the paradigm nowadays for remote audits. Since the COVID and this pandemic outburst and the travel restrictions that happened, this became impossible to do the presential audits. So basically, what happened is that the customers, the companies that buy the products to their suppliers, still have to ensure that the compliance level of their suppliers is still good, still acceptable to their parameters. So the presential audits were the preferential tool to do this, but with these travel restrictions, then some other ways have to come forward in order to keep them qualified. In these tools that came up during this COVID situation, the remote audits are the most used one. Before this pandemic, remote audits were seen as not as a very robust tool in face of the presential audits, but nowadays they have become more and more important in this topic. So the main challenge here is how can we pick up this process, this remote process, and turn it into something more reliable and close to what we have with presential audits. So that's the big challenge that we have to face during this time.
Okay, well, we have been talking a lot about audits and remote audits on the past, I would say, year.
Yeah,
and we hear a lot of different ways to mention these audits: remote audits, offsite audits, desktop audits, paper audits. At least these are the ones that come to my mind at this moment. Are there any differences between them, or it's just the same way to say one thing?
That in fact is a good question. There is a lot of mix-up information about paper audits, desktop audits, remote audits, but basically the main difference is that paper audits and desktop audits are audits that are only made through the documentation. Basically, you have the auditor request the documentation to the auditee sends the documentation, the auditor makes this assessment and makes a report of it. The remote audits are more than this. Let's say you have this part also, but you have the part where you connect with the auditor by the platforms, the digital platforms that we have. So there is a video conference, there is some space for the auditor to interview the auditee and pose questions, clarify doubts, and see other documents that most of the times do not come with the initial package. So, answering to your question, paper audits and desktop audits are basically some sort of pre-assessment of a full remote audit.
Thank you, Andre, for the clarification. Jose, how did you manage to increase the robustness that Andre already talked about of the audits?
Yeah, this question was in our mind when the pandemic started. We were trying to get to know how to develop a process that could get us the information that we usually get from on-site audits. So we have started to develop a written protocol. So all auditors in our team follow the same approach and get the same results consistently. So our process is basically, it consists on an initial documentation request that is more complete than the documentation request that we usually do in on-site audits. Additionally, we accompany this initial request with an offsite questionnaire. This offsite questionnaire, we built it to give us information on specific topics so we can assess some failures that the auditee could have in some specific topics and could direct us for the next steps of the video conference. After this initial information request, we feed a risk assessment. This risk assessment is based on the information collected and the time that we will have to perform the video conference. And then we decide if we should advance to a second documentation request or if we have enough information to proceed to the video conference. If we choose to advance to the second documentation request, we usually try to make a more complete documentation request, but directed to the possible failures that the auditee could have. And then we perform the final video conference. But all along the process, I think here the key is flexibility by both parties. For example, sometimes it happens that we are open to the auditee to send us the documents after the video conference because this is a new situation for everyone and sometimes we don't have the scanned document, the translated document, the key personnel is not available. So it makes sense to the auditee to be able to show compliance even after the video conference.
Thank you, Jose. So a well-thought plan with several steps in order to ensure the robustness of the process. Thank you very much for your answer. Well, I guess this also requires a lot of preparation by the auditee, right? Andre, can you build up a little bit on that?
Of course, and actually the preparation of the auditee is a key factor for the success of a remote audit. If you have a well-prepared auditee, the audit process is flowability, let's say, the way that the audit is led is much more plain and simple than when the auditee is not ready. In order for the auditee to be ready, in fact, there are some key points that you should focus. One of the main key points is about the documentation. Sometimes the mother language of the auditor and the auditee is not the same. So this happens a lot. We have audits in China, India, Mexico, South America, so Europe even. So in these cases, sometimes the main documents are not translated. So if the auditor and the auditee have a common language, usually English because it's the most common language understood by almost everyone in the area. If they have this documentation translated, it makes the process much more easier for the auditor to assess the documentation and for the auditee to explain what is written there. So it's very important. Another point is that this documentation should be digitalized. should be in the digital platform, so that it's easier to show it in the video conference if needed, or something, or even by sending by email or file transfer application to the auditor. Another point is that the auditee should be comfortable about the platforms, the digital platforms that are going to be used in the video conference. Nowadays, with the pandemics and everything, these platforms rose up in the web. So either use Teams or Google's Meet or Zoom or any other platform. The auditee should be comfortable about it, should know how to enter it, how to access it, how to share the documentation there, and be ready to any event that the auditor may request during the video conference, to be ready to use the platform in their behalf and showing the information needed to the auditor. Another point, and this is also a key point, is the internet access. Me and Jose already experienced some issues, sometimes in some video conference with auditees that have a bad connection. The connection fails. Sometimes you hear noises behind the people that are talking, or even breaks when the people are talking, and this is all related to the internet connection. So please be ensured in this case the auditee to have a good internet connection, so this again does not break the audit in the flow, the course of the audit. And finally, most of the video conference, we don't have only one person talking to us. We have the key experts areas, the experts in the different areas that come to the video conference and talk to us. So it's very important that everyone that will be involved in the remote process audit to be trained and to know what are the main difference between what they did in a presential audit and what they have to do with a remote audit process. So this is very important. Like I said in the beginning, the auditee prepared, it's halfway to have a good audit process.
Well, these internet connections, we all know that from time to time you experience them, and unfortunately, as much as we test, sometimes it works, and a few minutes afterwards it doesn't. But I would like to understand from your side, do you usually perform these technical tests with the auditees prior to the audits?
Yeah, we usually do it when we feel that the auditee is not so comfortable with the platform. For example, if they told us that is the first time that they will use that platform, we usually try to schedule a test, for example, for the day before of the video conference. 15-20 minutes just for the auditee to make his learning process with the platform, try to learn how to share documents, how to invite people to the meeting and feel comfortable. This process is usually saving us a lot of time during the video conference day.
Of course. Thank you for your input. We have here one question already from Bazem. I guess we'll go into this a little bit deeper later on, but I think it's important if you share a little bit of your thoughts on this. Is the remote audit accepted in the initial evaluation of new supplier, or it should be used for re-evaluation only?
That depends on the process. Let's say if you have a new supplier during a pandemic situation and you have to use it, the remote audit is the only option that you have. So you could use it and be accepted by the authorities as a part of a full risk assessment with the remote audit included. But obviously, let's say in the future, when everything, the travel ban and the travel restrictions go away, the presential audit will always be needed in this case. Even the authorities say, okay, you can do the remote audits, you can do this pre-assessment in the beginning, but when you should do a presential audit. So my answer is yes, but with some restrictions and always in the risk-based assessment.
And I guess it depends when we are talking about. One thing is the reality that we have nowadays.
Exactly, precisely.
Thank you. Jose, for sure you already had some difficulties during the audits. How did you overcome them?
We try to provide the tools for the auditees to be prepared. Some auditees are most prepared than others, and our work, our job is very easier. Is so much easier if the auditee is prepared. So I think it's important, and we always try to do this, to provide a couple of days in advance to the auditee a complete list of documentation that have high probability to be reviewed, so they can, in picking up the points that Andrea highlighted, they can translate the documents if applicable, they can scan the documents and be ready to share it during the audit day. Another point that we usually focus in is to provide a detailed agenda with the different steps of the audit day and the different key personnel that should be involved, so they know exactly when to be present in the video conference and when to be available. So this is then we always do the video conference test if the auditee needs. And another important topic that we usually do is to pick during the video conference, do regular updates of your pending documentation. When you are performing an audit, you request a lot of examples, a lot of documents, and there is always a lot of pending documents to be reviewed. If you are doing regular updates during the day, this allows the auditee not to forget those documents, and then they will be able to provide you the documents in the due time.
Thank you, José. From my experience, I have to say that's a tricky part, right? So you ask for a lot of things that probably they are not able to provide you immediately because of all the constraints that we are facing nowadays. So it's good to keep track of everything. Otherwise, we will end up with half the documentation. Thank you very much. Well, we have here another question. This time is from Joanna. Is there any official position from the authorities on the role and the future perspectives for remote audits?
Actually, there isn't. Let's say there are some positions made by EMA and by FDA even recently, that shows that the way towards the remote audits is something that should be thought about it and think about it basically. So we already have, for instance, here in Portugal, Infarmed doing remote inspections. In the last weeks, FDA also issued a remark on that they are going to start to make re-inspections based on a remote basis. So this is something that is going to happen already now. In the future, and talking about how the way that health authorities work, and they work a lot in risk assessment base, I would say yes, in some cases where the risk isn't that high, the remote audits should be an option on the table, and I really believe that it's going to be something in the future there.
Thank you. Well, more practical topics I would like to ask from you, your insights on the main challenges that you have faced.
We had quite a few, and yes, in our experience, and we have done a lot of remote audits. We had some challenges that we had to overcome. First of all, as I said, we do audits sometimes with Indian, Chinese suppliers, so Eastern suppliers. We also have Western suppliers, Mexico, South America. So the first issue here is the time difference. For one is less 8 hours, the other one is more 8 hours. So in order to have a video conference, and usually have an 8-hour video conference, 6, 7, 8 hours video conference, in order to have all this time to audit, we can do one of the two things that I'm going to say. First of all, we can divide the video conference in 2 different video conferences. Let's say in one day you do 4 hours and the next day you do another 4 hours. In this way you can get the morning or the afternoon of the auditor and the morning or the afternoon of the auditee, so that nobody is after hours doing the audit. But sometimes this is not possible because the suppliers have constraints and the people are not available in both days. So we have to do it all in the same video conference. So sometimes me and Jose are up in 6 a.m. in the morning to start an audit, or even be at midnight or something like that, finishing a remote audit. It happens. It's not very often, luckily, but it happens sometimes. Another point, another challenge that we face is the lack of body language. We are used to having presential audits where the body language has an important role in what the auditor sees in the other side. Either is someone lowering their eyesight, scratching the back of his head. I'm sure everybody there at home are thinking, oh yeah, he's got a point there.
I've experienced that.
Those type of signs that the auditee give us hints on where to look and where to dig, where could be probable non-compliance, probable observations. In this case, we don't have nothing of that. So we have, of course, we hear the person on the other side. We can detect sometimes the tone, the voice tone that could indicate something, but there is the lack of this body language and all of this. So we have to overcome this with more documentation and more attention to detail, and this is how we try to overcome this issue. Obviously, in the presential audits, you have the part of the tour that you have and you are in the premises looking at the equipment and the specific areas. In this case, we don't have that, so we try to overcome it always with the detailed scrutiny of the plant layouts, checking the flows, material flows, personal flows. Trying to see documentation about the HVAC system, how the cross-contamination is overcome, maintenance documentation, and with this documentation we try to overcome the lack of not being of presential
on the shop floor.
physical presence on the shop floor. So basically, this is the main challenge that we have here.
So I guess my next question will be, okay, is videos or footages of the warehouse, manufacturing site, the QC lab, a useful tool or any added value for the process? But before you answer, let me go to a question that I have here from Rafael. Because he says, I understand that in terms of document evaluation, remotely seems to be feasible. But in terms of tours or visit a specific process, for example, how do you handle this?
Yeah. Like Andre told, we try to focus on document and evidence that can give us information about how the company is organized, how the cross-contamination and possible mixtures between different products are avoided in the company, the material flows, the personal flows, the plant layouts, the specific evidence for cleaning, for maintenance of the equipment. We try to focus on that. Until this moment, we are not so confident, despite the fact some auditors rely so much in video tours, but we are not so confident that this is a valuable information if it is done during the audit day. And why? That's because during the audit day, we usually have a time limit to assess all the topics from the quality system. We are always on the run. So the video tour will be a lot of time consuming. And after it, maybe sometimes it doesn't add so much information. Because if you think into it, we can film whatever we are confident that we can show, not the parts that are not of interest. So sometimes it's not useful, but of course, if the footages came to us before the video conference day, it's useful information and can arise questions for the video conference day.
As an example, just answering to Rafael initially, and also giving an example of what José was saying. One of our last presential audits that me and José were present, we were in the shop floor, and we have a battery of 6 reactors altogether. 5 reactors were just impeccable, and one of them was peeling. Basically, the maintenance was not given. If I was the auditee, I would film the 5 reactors and not film that one. And this is the type of observations that you can see on the shop floor. Answering to Rafael about the manufacturing process and everything, you have some tools that you can use without being present there. Process validation, documentation is very important for you to assess this. And another point is regarding the batch records. And the batch records, you can see a lot from the processing that the eye doesn't see it. So you can have a proper assessment and knowing about the flow of the manufacturing process and the steps that they take. You compare it with the batch record, you compare it with the validation documentation, and you can have a pretty clear assessment if things are being done in a compliant manner or not.
Thank you. And before we move on, I would like to check as well one of the polls that we had on LinkedIn, and it was regarding the footages of the manufacturing site. Are they a useful tool or not? We can see that from the votes, 71% agrees that it is indeed useful. Do you have anything to add?
Like I was saying, if they send the footages to us before the video conference, yes, it's valuable information. If the footages or the plant tours are done within the video conference time, sometimes we have to, and always on a risk-based approach, on the quantity of information that we have left to review to decide, and sometimes it's not so valuable.
Okay, thank you. Moving a little bit back, because we have already 2 questions regarding still the documentation. So one of them is from Rafael. So he says that you mentioned about issues to wait to receive the documents or evidence. How do you handle this in terms of the audit agenda and time? But before you answer, maybe I'll go to the next question from Susanna because it's directly linked. She's asking, what is the acceptable deadline to accept document evidences after the audit?
Regarding the acceptance of documents, we usually try to agree a timeline, an acceptable timeline with the auditee. And we usually take around 2 weeks or between 2 and 4 weeks to prepare our audit report. So this time is the one that we think it's acceptable. But in a current manner, we usually try to agree with the auditee that we should receive the information in the next couple of days, at the end of the week, something like that. A very near timeline, very close, so they can show us that they are compliant, but what it's not supposed is that they prepare the action already, and so we give a short timeline, but an acceptable one.
Okay, but it's previously agreed with the auditee?
Yeah, of course.
The timings, okay.
And
good.
the question about Rafael was about what, sorry?
He says that he understands the term document evaluation remotely, and it seems, oh no, sorry, that was the other one. How do you handle in terms of the audit agenda and time?
Okay, that's
But,
what
José
was
covered.
answering, that we have to manage.
Yeah, always a risk-based approach. We have to look at our agenda, to the topics that we want to review, and during the day we will adapt according to the time that was left. We think about the risk of certain topics, and we go for the high-risk ones if we don't have the time to assess everything.
Okay, thank you. So one last question, still regarding the videos. This one is from Anna. good morning, she says to all of us. But what if you ask for a particular footage or for the recording to be done slowly, like an actual live tour? Can you not overcome this possibility embellishments? I think she is mentioning the peeling of the reactor.
The peeling of the reactor. You could, but like I said, you could overcome that. But the information again that you're going to gather, I don't think it's valuable according to the time that you have to do the audit. Again, you have the battery of the 6 reactors there, and we have one that is better. Even if you go slowly, you can pass around the part of the reactor that is not peeling. And this means that you don't have, basically this is a perspective manner. You don't have the full perspective of the area, so you don't know exactly to say to the auditee to film this or film that, because you don't have the full perspective, and you have to rely on what the auditee is showing you. So this could be easily overcome by the auditee if he wants to do this. I don't think that there is a bad faith behind this, but anyway, like I said, if you have, and Jose said this, if you have the time, go for it, do the footage, do the video. At least you have some more information that you can use. But if you don't have the time, the information that you're going to gather is not that important or that big that you could rely on.
I think, and to complement what Andre was saying, the time is key here. If we have a 2-day audit, maybe we can consider to have the video tour or to check the footage during the video conference. But if you have an 8-hour for 1-day audit, maybe the value that it adds is not the same as if you go and check proper evidence, proper records, proper procedures.
And another point, to do a live video inside a premises of a plant usually is very hard because the network is not that good inside, and to do that live video you need a lot of band space to do it. And most of the times we see all granulated and with cuts, and that's why we say we understand the value of it, but it's not that easy to achieve.
Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. But I would like to understand, maybe it's interesting. You've been doing remote audits for the past year. I'm pretty sure that you've done a lot. For how many did you get the chance to see this footage?
In my personal experience, only 2 times I had the experience to do that footage. And one was an audit that at least was for 5 days. It began on Monday, it ended on Friday. So I had a lot of time to check this. And the other one, they gave me the footage, like a presented footage of the plant beforehand the video conference.
Thank you very much. So, Andre, probably we'll continue with you. So are remote audits less reliable?
Less reliable than presential ones. Let's say the remote audits cannot replace entirely a presential audit, and that we have this said. But when remote audits are well prepared by the auditor and the auditee, the process becomes much more robust. So it's easier, much more easier for the process to become almost equivalent as a presential audit. Always this remote audit, this interpretation of the remote audit has to be approached in the risk-based analysis, in a risk-based assessment on every audit. As a matter of fact, we brought some graphics with the relationship between the observations between remote audits and presential audits. And in fact, the difference is not that big. There is not such a big difference between both of them as it was supposed to imagine. In this first graphic that we have here, we have on the left side of the screen the finished formed audits to the finished formed doses, and on the left part of the screen we have the APIs. The yellow bar there is regarding the presential audits, and the gray bar is regarding the remote audits. As you can see, we don't have any critical observations in neither of them, but on the major observations, the minor observations and the recommendations, the difference is not that high between what we see in the remote audit and what we see in the presential audit. And if you go further in the next graphic that we have here, we can see that the observations by department have actually some curious results. As expected, the remote audit, the presential audits are much more effective when we're talking about the part of the premises and the equipment. Also, when we're talking about the production, the storage and the distribution, as you can see from the finished forms, with the red bars being the on-site audits, the presential audits, and the gray bars being the remote audits, we can see that these two areas have the effectiveness of the presential audits is bigger. However, when we come to documentation and we come to qualification and validation, especially in the APIs, we notice that the remote audits are much more effective. They have more observations in this part. And this means that the attention to detail, the attention to the documentation that is given in a remote audit is higher than what is given during a presential one. As for the other parts, as you can see, are almost equivalent. We're talking about quality systems, we're talking about the personnel, we're talking about the quality control. So basically, you have these parts leveled. So in theory, they almost complement each other.
Thank you, Andre. So, what is the future for remote audits? Are they really here to stay? José, what is your opinion?
In a simple manner, I would say yes, they are here to stay. When we look to compare the remote audits to the on-site audits, they have some clear disadvantages. But they have also some advantages that we can focus on, like, for example, the remote audits allow us to do a cost-effective supplier qualification, because you don't have to travel to have all the logistic costs, and even regarding time for the auditor. They don't lose time in these logistics. So they have some advantages. I think that the future is to consider it in a risk-based approach. For example, if you have a supplier that has a good quality history with you, you have audited the supplier a lot of times, several times, and they show compliance with the regulations. Maybe you can consider it to a remote audit. Or, for example, for less critical materials, if you have a packaging material manufacturer that is, of course, less critical than an API one, maybe you can choose to do it remotely. Or even if we look at the results that Andrea mentioned previously, we can use it for short scope audits, for example. Imagine that you have some specific concerns with the manufacturer regarding documentation. We have seen that if you have a robust process, you can get similar results in documentation and sometimes even better. So why not to do it remotely? So in conclusion, I think remote audits are not here to replace on-site audits, but they will be a good tool to complement the on-site audits and for companies to have a cost-effective supplier qualification process.
Yeah, and for sure, just to back up what José was saying, this new paradigm of everybody working online and doing their jobs from their homes, doing remotely. This had a huge impact in all business, and this is one of them. And for sure, this is going to back up more the importance of remote audits in the future.
Do you think we are looking forward to a healthy mix between remote and on-site audits?
I do believe, as José, in the answer José gave, it said all about it. I think it is the future of the audits and the qualification of suppliers. It will pass a lot through this.
Thank you. We have here one last question. From Katerina. Are remote audits valid for 3 years as the presential ones?
This is a tricky question, but it all depends on, once again, our risk-based approach. We at Pharma, at the moment, we are suggesting to, if we have a remote audit with, in which the audit is shown perfect compliance with the regulations and everything, not more than 24 months, 2 years of validity for this kind of audits. But once again, if we have a supplier that have shown good compliance over the years and good results in past audits, why not to have this kind of validity? Everything depends on the history, the information that we have from the supplier, and the risk assessment that we make, and the parameters that we want to value the most in a supplier.
And again, what José is saying is backed up by EMA. They said in cases where you cannot do the presential audit, or that you have some kind of constraint, or the remote audits are a possible way to get around it, always based on risk that you may have there. Also, recently the FDA gave some timelines about this period. They gave a 12-month period, but okay, this will always depend on health authority to health authority and how is it approached. But again, if you have done a remote audit and the remote audit is reliable, this could be transported to a risk base in your company, and you can explain to the inspector, okay, we don't have a presential audit, but in face of what we have here, we are fully confident that the supplier can give us this assurance of quality on their product.
Thank you very much, André. Thank you very much, José, for your time, for sharing with us your experiences and also your perspectives, because it is not clear what the future waits. Yeah. So it is very, very interesting to be able to have this conversation.
It was a pleasure, I must say.
And although it is still not clear the exact role and framework for remote audits, they have earned their place. That is clear. It's just a matter of understanding how. So I guess it's safe to say they are most probably here to stay. Thank you everyone on that side as well for making the questions and make us step out a little bit of what we had planned to discuss. It is always good to deviate and to learn a little bit more. Stay safe. Thank you very much.